The world of Fallout 4 is a desolate and bleak environment filled with horror and hardship. However, amongst the ruins of America, there are some societies that have maintained a cushy existence reminiscent of the pre-war era. In this video, I wanted to take a look at Fallout 4 and come to a conclusion. Who has the best life in Fallout? To structure this video, I wanted to climb the ranks of what I would consider the best quality of life in Fallout 4, first starting off at the bare bones of what could be considered a comparatively good life to other possibilities, and working our way up to the top spot. I won't mention every single possible life or every single faction in the game, but I will cover most bases from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. So starting off at the worst possible quality of life in Fallout 4, that would be that of a slave. The Fallout world is one very much void of laws and morality in large parts of the United States, and in Boston, Massachusetts it is no different, and as such, slavery is a serious situation that many individuals end up in. A prime example would be Nuka World, which was once a great trading hub before gangs of raiders enslaved all the former merchants working there. Being a slave is absolutely terrible, and certainly the worst position you could be in, as you have lost the fundamental right of freedom. It's difficult to estimate how many people there are enslaved in Fallout 4, it's certainly less common than it was in other Fallout games, which very much leaned into the horror of slavery, but I would say maybe around 1 to 5% of the population of Boston, Massachusetts may be enslaved. This is the worst quality of life possible. Slaves are routinely assaulted, psychologically abused, and forced to commit heinous acts for the benefit, or sometimes merely the amusement, of their owners. A good account of how terrible slavery was comes from Kate, our companion. We can find her at the combat zone in Fallout 4, and Kate tells us about the horrors of slavery that she suffered as her own parents sold her into slavery, and she had to do what she had to do to survive. Eventually, she could purchase her own freedom, and once she was able to escape, she returned home and murdered her parents for what they did to her. Clearly, the anger and rage festering in Kate for her parents selling her into a life of slavery was insurmountable, and shows that slavery is the worst form of existence possible in the Fallout universe. For the 95 to 99% of people who are not enslaved, they may be in the vast majority, but they have escaped a horrific and terrible fate, and are thus living a much better life than some. Having your freedom is the most basic component to a good life, so that is why we have started with this category. Now, moving upward to a much better quality of life, we have those who reside in some form of rudimentary settlement. This will encompass people who exist in towns that possess more than immediate family members and friends, and any form of town that has any semblance of food distribution, economy, security, and other basic things. Places like Good Neighbor and Bunker Hill will sit around this area. These types of towns will be small and probably have pretty high crime rates, and won't be the most secure settlements, with malnutrition, dehydration, raider attacks, disease, and other nasty things being fairly commonplace. The reason being is because most settlements have not built up significant economies to battle such detrimental societal issues. I would wager that about 50% of the Commonwealth belong to some form of town, however small and rudimentary that may be. This life is certainly not great, but it offers much more protection and the greater possibility of food compared to living outside a town and in a small group. We often find straggler wastelanders wandering the landscape with maybe a friend or two, and they are completely exposed out in the open, ripe to be robbed by raiders or mauled by an animal. Towns provide the building blocks of society and some form of law and order. It is just that many of these towns are too poor to create strong governments and security systems. This is a major step up from the life that about 50% of wastelanders lead who do not reside in a town or major settlement. When we first arrive on the scene of Good Neighbor, we get a feeling of how this town is. 2 corpses lay in the path toward the door of the settlement, and upon our arrival inside, we are immediately threatened by an individual to hand him caps for insurance purposes. In response to hearing this, the mayor of the town approaches the man and slaughters him right in the street. This all happened within 1 minute of our arrival. There are now 3 dead bodies in close vicinity to one another, and the murderer of the last man was the mayor of the town. This type of behaviour and lawlessness will be extremely commonplace in these rudimentary settlements. Life here is better than laying in the dirt unprotected. Here walls do exist, but the people who culminate in these places are nefarious individuals. We see more of this during the Silver Shroud questline, where we are tasked with removing some of the criminals from the city. We find Wayne Delancey, a known murderer, just walking the streets, having killed someone else, with no consequences. We also later find AJ the chem dealer, who peddles his merchandise to children, simply lurking in an alley with his posse. More than that, we can openly slaughter these people and no one bats an eye. The security team doesn't care at all if we do this. Whilst we may be justified in killing some of these terrible people, that doesn't mean that it should be acceptable to take justice into our own hands whenever we feel like it, and without a proper trial to go over all of the evidence. Good Neighbour is a prime example of the type of town that populates most of the post-war world. It is better to live here than alone and outside, but the conditions within these places are not brilliant. Now, a promotion from living in a general town would be living with a strong clan or faction. Something like serving the Brotherhood of Steel at a low to middle rank would be a good position in order to outrank probably 65 to 70% of other Wastelanders, and also a position in the Gunners faction or even the Nuka World Raiders. Life in a military organisation means that you are persistently surrounded by trained personnel, weaponry and armour, meaning that you are pretty safe all things considered. These big organisations have very structured logistics departments, so supply lines for food and water are never scarce. Soldiers are fed and paid on time and handsomely. There is a myriad of jobs to devote your time to, rather than working as just a general labourer, as most probably would in a generic town. Here you could learn skills and develop your knowledge more than most people in the wasteland ever would. Of course, the obvious downside to a life like this would be the expectation to enter into combat. Even if you were not directly a soldier, you would be expected to enter into battle, as we see with someone like Scribe Halen, who when we first stumble upon the Brotherhood at the Cambridge police station, she fights a long paladin dance and Knight Reese against the ghouls. The access to very scarce and advanced technology would further bolster the quality of life within these groups, like the Brotherhood of Steel and possibly even the Gunners. The Brotherhood and the Gunners both have access to laser weaponry, fortified bases and vertibirds, giving them a huge advantage in combat over nearly everyone else they encounter. Whereas joining a local militia or raider force would be something many would do to survive, their quality of life would be abysmal, and they would live like animals as they have no advanced technology or structure to their group. The Gunners and the Brotherhood are prime examples of joining military institutions to get away from the vile living conditions of the wasteland that so many reside in. Another major aspect to discuss when thinking about being part of a military faction is the possibility of that faction taking control over vast swaths of land. At the end of Fallout 4, if we side with the Brotherhood, we find them almost everywhere, even in places like Diamond City. Being part of a strong military force that has the possibility of overtaking large areas ensures that you belong to a dominant group and thus will likely benefit heavily from being part of them. Think of the Norman conquest of England. Imagine being just a regular Norman knight, but now suddenly your ethnic group controls the entire country and you are granted more land and wealth than you ever would have thought possible. This of course is a very theoretical point, as the military faction that a person belongs to may not dominate the Commonwealth, but the possibility is there and it was worth mentioning. An improvement to living with a strong clan or faction would be living in towns that are actually secure and economically sound, so realistically Diamond City or a fortified Minuteman settlement built by the player character. Those who reside in these relatively safe settlements have access to adequate food and water and are better off than probably 80 to 90% of other individuals in Fallout 4. These settlements are marked by a low amount of random crime, high resource count, strong economy, good population numbers, and outside security. So many people reside in unsafe and terrible conditions that cause them to contract illnesses, die of malnutrition, or become enslaved or simply be murdered by the many gangs of villainous scum that roam the wastes. Diamond City possesses Diamond City Security, which both roams inside and outside the city's walls. They are multiple feet of thick brick, concrete and metal that are incredibly tall and near impossible to climb, especially without being spotted by the security roaming nearby. The one entrance is a thick metallic door that is mechanically opened from the inside, meaning there's no chance that some pack of raiders are going to be able to barrage their way in. The entry point is marked by more security, and only a narrow passage actually leads to the main city itself. There is no organised crime in Diamond City, and there is no random sporadic violence like we see in Good Neighbour. Diamond City is incredibly secure, and its economy is incredibly strong. If you want to learn more about Diamond City's economy, then watch the video in the top right corner. The extreme safety of Diamond City in comparison to Good Neighbour, whose entry point is essentially a metallic door surrounded by some wood, evidences the advantages Diamond City has over other settlements. Persons like Arturo Rodriguez, Myrna and others have homes to go into and caps to spare. They have food, water and shelter, among other luxuries like friends, music, bars and security. This is certainly an amazing life to lead in the Fallout universe, and many people would kill for such a living, so these folks should thank their lucky stars that they are able to lead these kinds of lives. Moving further upward, here we would find positions of leadership in middling factions or towns like the Mayor of Diamond City, or the leader of a large pack of raiders like Mason or Nisha in the Nuka World DLC. These would be exceptional lives to live in the world of Fallout, with these individuals possessing significant amounts of power and wealth, much more than the people living under their control. Mayor McDonough had enough political power to oust an entire race, which was the Ghouls, from Diamond City and permanently ban them from re-entering. The mayor lives in the most prestigious house at the top of the city, ensuring his general safety and also granting him a much better home than every other resident. Armed security patrol his office and his living quarters, and he even has a personal assistant to take care of his more menial matters. The life of the mayor is one that is certainly amazing. Similarly, the role of Mason or Nisha or Mags and William in the Nuka World DLC is to lead their specific gang, with these gangs of raiders being very large, and thus the leader's influence and power is considerable. Mason rests himself on his throne most of the day and orders his posse about. He is their leader, their chief, their overlord and their boss. What he says goes, and there are no exceptions. These raiders live a much different life to the residents of Diamond City, but the leader of both the Nuka Raiders and the leader of Diamond City live very similar, cushy lives. These people never have to worry about food or water, and have huge swaths of wealth and influence, making them live better than easily 95 to 99% of all Wastelanders. Naturally, above these individuals would be the leaders or those of exceptionally high rank in the much more powerful factions on the surface like the Brotherhood or the Minutemen. These individuals have all the perks of the previous group, but just amplified even more. The Brotherhood and the Minutemen, when built up by the player character, are extreme forces that are quite frankly unstoppable. Diamond City, although it would be difficult, could potentially be conquered, as could the Nuka Raiders, meaning the positions of leadership amongst these factions are not absolute, as a larger, more terrifying force could take them out. The Brotherhood is a military machine that is armed to the teeth with more armour, weapons and soldiers than any other group. Of course, it is entirely up to the player character, but if you build the Minutemen into an ultimate fighting force, then the same can be said about them. Those who are the leaders like Elder Maxon, or those in extremely high positions of leadership like Lancer Captain Kells, lead almost godly lives as the power they wield is insurmountable. Their sheer importance ensures their survival. They are the priority of huge organisations which will cater to their every need. If Elder Maxon desires to get some of the most exotic items in the Commonwealth, he can request it. Of course, the people in these roles must perform, and if they don't, they can easily be demoted. But whilst they are at the peak of the social order of their huge factions, they are leading some of the best possible lives that anyone in the Commonwealth could lead. This is easily people in the 99th and beyond percentile. Now, what could possibly be better than leading a huge military faction and being the most respected and honoured member? Well, living in a utopia, in my opinion, supersedes this. This is where the members of the Institute come in. Whilst a regular Institute scientist doesn't wield even a fraction of the power that the leader or high-in-command member of the Brotherhood does, they lead lives that are entirely free from stress, violence and worry. Members of the Institute do not want for anything. Their food is infinite, as is their water and security. Living in an underground safe haven ensures it is literally impossible for any outside threats to attack them. No member of the Institute ever fears contracting a disease, being poisoned, being assassinated, or attacked. The most the Institute fear is that their scientific expansion of ideas is slowing down as they are outpacing their power resources. The Institute is quite literally free from crime. It simply doesn't happen. Each area of the Institute is dedicated to advancing science in a particular field. Bioscience, advanced systems, robotics, and the SRB all serve their purpose, and each area provides the Institute members with unfathomable luxury. The sterile and clean environment of the Institute is impossible to imagine on the surface. Even the most pampered and luxurious lives that surface dwellers lead are still subject to the randomness of disease or possible violence. Economies can crash and social orders can change, however unlikely the odds. But life in the Institute is constant and peaceful. The expansion of science is noble and incredibly important, and the sheer beauty of living in the Institute ensures that it is near perfection. Those born into the Institute are amongst the luckiest of the lucky, the luckiest 99.9% of people in the entire Commonwealth. This, in my opinion, is the best possible life that a group of people can lead. Anyone, no matter how powerful, no matter how lucky, no matter how wealthy they are on the surface, cannot compare their life to that of a member of the Institute. Finally, of course, the best possible life that could be led in all of Fallout 4 and the Commonwealth is obviously the leader of the Institute. As discussed, the Institute is essentially perfect for those who live within, and the only step up would be to be in command of all of it. Wielding ultimate power is something that not many factions bestow upon their leaders, but in the case of the Institute, the director is the king, and what he says goes. Sean, when he is director, names us as his successor, a choice that is met with significant backlash. However, there is no debate or disagreement. The word of the director is final. The position is essentially being omnipotent whilst you live in a utopia. You are the sole ruler of a paradise, and everything you say will be taken as gospel. Here, directors can influence the direction of the Institute, instructing the members to work on cures for aging, or robotic implants, or the synth program, or anything else. This is undoubtedly the best possible life that could be led in all of Fallout 4. So that was my analysis of all of the possible lives that could be led in Fallout 4. Of course, it wasn't every single possible life. I didn't go over being a mechanic, being a trader, but the generic areas that one could live in Fallout 4 and the lives that they may be able to lead. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like. If you disagreed with anything I've said, if you think I missed out a major group, or you didn't agree with anything that I said in the video, then do let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you agreed with me, then also let me know if you agreed with me, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you again for watching. In a bit.